So one of the things that I've always really wanted to write ever since I was little and I wanted to start writing things was superhero stories. I love superhero stories a lot because I like the superpowers, I like the idea of justice, I like the idea of, saving the weak and the innocent. And that was something that I loved when I was a kid. As I got older, I started to recognize the complexity of the world and knew that as a writer, while I could definitely indulge in that kind of thing, I also needed to indulge a little bit of realism as well. You got to inject some dispassionate realism into your story sometimes, and at times that can go too dark for my liking, but there are times where I also feel like that dark edginess sometimes works well. And I realized that quickly when I started looking into old westerns and the like. And yes, that does include Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, my brother got far more into the games than I did. I mean, I enjoy them. I think they're great games, but the long-running pace of them, I couldn't get into them as much as he did. But that's fine. I still think that they're a great series of games. It was just something that I didn't get as much into as he did. But what happened was, sometime along the way, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, Lark came to me and he said, Raven, I have a request for a story. And I said, okay. He said, I'd like you to write a Western-style story, not unlike Red Dead Redemption, but have it be a little bit dark and involve the supernatural. And so we sat down and we brainstormed the idea, and we came up with something that was kind of a combination of Red Dead Redemption 2, the TV show Supernatural, and a couple other things. And so we started coming up with characters, ideas, directions, stories, subplot points, and thus we created the story Wraith Riders. Now, what is Wraith Riders? The story follows a young man by the name of Jake Brewer. Jake Brewer actually came from a pretty well-off family. The problem is that his father was a colonel in the Confederate Army during the Civil War. Now, many people think of the Confederate Army and they immediately think racist, but that's not entirely true. Many of the Confederates were not racist by nature. They were fighting mostly for their states, and that was the case with Jake's father. He was doing it because he was loyal to his state. And he was also a brilliant military mind, but he saw the writing on the wall at one battle and decided to surrender rather than risk the lives of his men. And this pissed everyone off. Why did he surrender? Why did he give up? He could have fought and won, and the Confederacy might have been able to win the Civil War. So ever since, Jake's father was hated. People were disgusted by him. The name Brewer became an absolute laughingstock throughout the Midwest. And Jake had to live with that shame. But it got worse. Apparently a couple of his father's old officers got together and killed him. So Jake is now fatherless because of these mutineers. And apparently these mutineers didn't just kill him in your typical traditional sense. They mutilated him. They butchered him. They made him a pariah publicly. Jake was furious, but at the time just a little too young to be able to go out and do things on his own. So he had to kind of live with the reality that his father had died and he couldn't do anything about it. Now, these men who did this had to flee from the law because whether or not you like the guy or hate the guy, it's still illegal to kill him. So they had to flee from the law out into the mountains and into the jungle area. Well, not jungles, but you get the idea, like the Wild West. And they were starving. And eventually they had to turn to cannibalism. And if you know anything about Native American lore, when you are out in the starving badlands, wildlands, and you eventually turn to cannibalism, it can turn you into something dark. And those officers became Wendigo. They decide that they like this new form, they like this new power of theirs, and they decide to form their own gang that they call the Wraiths. And they basically go around harassing towns and villages at night and feeding on the populace. Why? Because they have no other reason not to. They're already outlaws. Why not just embrace it? So now Jake is hard-pressed to catch and kill them. He's been learning about Native American history. He's been learning about the lore and the mythos behind Wendigo, and he's prepared to hunt them down. He has become a regular monster hunter. The problem is he can't do it on his own. Along the way, Jake meets multiple different people who all have their own brushes with the supernatural, including the Wraiths. He meets Isaiah, a young former slave whose master and family were killed by the Wraiths, and his aunt, who they all call Mama, because she is a very mama-like woman, even though she does not have any children for a very dark reason. It does have to do with the Wraiths, so yeah, be prepared for that. I don't want to spoil too much about the characters' backstories right now. They meet a guy named Anton, who fled from Austria to come to America. He acts as the group doctor. Meet Emilio, who is the chef of the gang, and he refuses to carry a gun because it's not that he's a pacifist, he's just afraid of guns, and there's a reason why. Again, I don't want to spoil too much. You have Saul, who's just this prickly very difficult to get along with guy. He cares about the group, but he's not good at showing his emotions. He's not good at being warm and cuddly. So he often comes off as abrasive and harsh and even a little racist. But the truth is, he'd take a bullet for anyone there. He just doesn't know how to explain that. You got a lot of really colorful characters, including Running Bear. I love Running Bear. He's a Native American who joined the group. He had escaped from one of the schools that they took Native Americans to at the time, where they tried to change his name and his identity and his ideals, but he never went for that. And so there's always this kind of conflict of identity for him. So very cool way to explore him. And as the story starts, because that's all preamble, that's all set up for the story. As the story starts, what happens is Jake actually meets a young Japanese woman in a bar who looks very much like a fish out of water, and he ends up saving her from a bounty hunter who mistook her for another criminal and, took her into his wing. And the reason why is because she mentioned that her brother had been captured by yokai, and she's come to America to save them. Now, Jake has no idea what yokai are, but he assumes that they could have something to do with the supernatural, and therefore could have something to do with the wraiths. And he thinks she might have information. The problem is she's got a language barrier, and she is quite frankly just a fish out of water. She has no idea what she's doing. She doesn't know how to use a gun. She doesn't know how to ride a horse. She doesn't know how to do any of this stuff. And he even asked her at one point in the story, did you just come all the way to America to die? Just straight up. And so she has to learn how to survive in the West. She has to learn how to survive in this kind of environment. And this will slowly change her, not only in her way of doing things, but also in how she approaches her problems. Because she was from a samurai family at the time that the samurai were dying out. This is about the point when the samurai had been outlawed and they were changing things with the Meiji Restoration. The way of the samurai was pretty much done. And she came from a former samurai family. She's used to having respect attached to her name. But in America, there is no respect attached to her name. No one cares about her name. So she's having to learn that a lot of the things she was accustomed to, she's not going to get. And it's not like she pouts about it. She doesn't pitch a fit. She's not a brat. She's not a Karen. She recognizes this, but this change in environment is very hard for her, and I really liked writing Yumi. She was such a fun character. Now, one thing that I was concerned about is I told Lark that I did want to write this Japanese character because of what we could do with her and her samurai upbringing, but I was worried. I said, Lark, do you think that there would be Japanese people in America at this point in time? We know there are a lot of China folk in America at this point in time, but would there be Japanese folk? And he pointed out, yeah, absolutely. We have evidence that there would have been some, not as many as the China folk, but there would have been some. We have evidence of Japanese folks coming to America about this time. It would not be impossible. So we decided to run with it. And I know some people are going to say, isn't that a little bit of a stretch? Well, at the same time, consider that we are writing a story about Red Dead 2 meets Supernatural, right? And that will come into play. There will be moments where they do have to hunt the supernatural. They will have to fight monsters, the wraiths, they will actually have to deal with that kind of stuff. The real problem I ran into with the story was overall direction. What we had come to was I'd created multiple unique characters with very unique backgrounds and directions and identities. But we didn't have an overarching plot direction. Like, where are they trying to go? What are they trying to do? Obviously, they're trying to kill the wraiths, but how are they going about it? What direction are they going in? And I realized that the big flaw in the story was that I had created a cast of characters very well. I had not created a story very well. And that's something that I would use this story as a cautionary tale about. Always make sure that no matter how good your characters are, if they don't have a story to follow, if they don't have a direction to go, then you don't have anything really. You have characters with nothing to do, and that's pretty bad. That's not a story. That's just a concept outline. So what I've been doing with Lark lately is we've been sitting down and actually hashing out an actual direction we want to go with the story. I've already actually done some reading. I've been reading the first two Wraith Rider chapters, and I uploaded them on this channel. You can actually read those if you want to, or listen to me, rather. And there's a third one that I've already written that I will read a little later, but that's all I've got right now because Lark and I are still planning out what we want to do with this story and the direction we want to take it. But I do plan to do more with the story. I do plan to write more of it. I hope that you guys will be excited for that. Let me know down in the comment section if you think that this is a neat story idea, or if you don't think so, it's fine, I'll understand. But with all that out of the way, that about does it for this story sharing video. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you in my next one. Take care.
You must be Crip's friend. I'll try not to hold that against you. My name's Maggie. Thanks for coming.
She's bound still.
Yeah, maybe. Feels like it'd be much easier for everyone if I just stayed gone. But life ain't about being easy.
I promise you.
Taken back.
2 of us already got a nice little business going.
Long as you know, won't be pretty. I don't do pretty no more.
So, what's the buy-in?
First things first, I need back one of those. I reckon you'll have a fair enough investment. Teach you everything I know. So what you say? So,
Maybe we can stop for a drink on the way.
we just had a drink.
I know. Now I want another one.
Some things don't change.